Hello, church. I hope that you're having a great day. Whether it's Sunday and this is part of your Sunday morning worship service, I hope that your service has been good so far, and that you've been able to glorify God and worship Him with other people in whatever way that you can, and um, that is showing that you really truly love Him and that you are willing to serve Him no matter what the situation is, and that's to be commended to you. So I hope that is going well. If you have your Bibles, turn to 1 Samuel. We'll be looking at the story of David in just a moment. Um, Kind of with everything that's going on, I've been thinking about, as many people in the world have, about this whole COVID-19 situation, how it's affected pretty much everyone in the world in some way or another. Me personally, I obviously don't have COVID-19. No one that I've known, none of my family, none of my close friends have COVID-19 or had COVID-19. No one's died from it. The closest I've gotten to is I know someone who knows someone that has a family member affected by it. But that's kind of the closest I've come to it. And I think that's what most people in the world, probably especially in America, that's probably most of their situation is they haven't been directly affected by the disease itself. It hasn't infected themselves or someone that's close to them. I hope that's the case for you as well. But I have, as everyone in the world, has been affected by the consequences of this virus, the COVID-19, and in many different ways. And maybe you're going through the same struggles. This wasn't how I planned my April and March going. I had various things that I had going on, as probably you did too. Plans that were interrupted. Um, I was looking forward to growing my relationship with you and having more and more people over and being able to enjoy the summer and the spring with you guys. And that's not the case. Many people have had birthdays in which they can't have anyone over. They've had events and other gatherings canceled in the future. We had a whole sports season that I was really bummed about that was canceled. And many of you have either lost their job, unfortunately, or been laid off temporarily, or just are working in different situation. You may be working at home, not able to do your job most effectively, or maybe taking a temporary hiatus with your job. And it's maybe affecting your job specifically. And so it's affected you in those ways, but it also has affected you maybe emotionally, maybe socially. You probably feel a little bit lonely, a little bit alone. If you've been staying inside like many people have, you haven't got to see many people outside of your personal family, the people that you live with. You haven't got to see your friends that you normally get to see, or your coworkers, or your classmates, or your extended family. You haven't got to see them in maybe over a month. Many people haven't done that. And so you feel alone. You feel very lonely. You need that. We're very social beings. And so when that is not met in our life, it's a struggle. And the struggle is real. And maybe you've also had feelings of being scared, of anxiety. And I guess I could of being scared, of anxiety, of um, not knowing if you're going to get this disease, especially if you're in a population that it's a little bit more dangerous if you get it. You're a little bit older, you have a pre-existing condition. It can be very scary. Or maybe you're scared that one of your family members, your grandpa or your grandma, um, is going to get it. And because of that, you haven't been able to see them. You've not seen your grandma, your grandpa, or inversely, your daughters or great granddaughters or great grandsons or sons because of this whole situation. I've known people who were not able to have a full service to say goodbye to their loved ones because they died during this, and they couldn't really do anything. They just kind of had to have a personal family service for them and say their goodbyes, but not in the way that they would like to. It's a very difficult time right now when you're in an unexpected situation, when you're feeling alone and isolated, and you're scared and anxious about what the future may hold. Is this going to continue forever? And then you, on top of the health concerns of the virus, the economic concerns too, because of the whole shutdown. If you've been laid off or even reduced hours, or you have a business and it's suffering, am I going to keep my business running? Am I going to provide for my family? Am I going to be doing these things that I need to do? It's a time of anxiousness, and you could be very easily scared. And as I thought about these things, and a lot of these things that affect me too, and that I'm going through, I kind of was thinking back to one of my favorite people in all of the Bible, David. I relate to him so much in so many different ways. And as I thought more and more about his story, he really seemed to have went through a very similar circumstance. And so I'd like to kind of go through that and show how he really relates to what we went through and how he got out of that situation, how he dealt with that situation, and he was delivered from that distress that he was going through. And maybe we can learn the same things of how we can be delivered from the distress that we're going through. So if you don't mind, take out your Bibles and turn to 1 Samuel. We'll kind of start in chapter 16. We'll do kind of a really big run through of David's life, especially the beginning of his life. And then I'm going to stop and pick out a few stories and a few verses here and there. But let's kind of just get a review for those that may not be familiar with David's life. David was appointed king because God had rejected Saul, because Saul wasn't doing what God said. So he took this little boy who's a shepherd, the youngest of his family, very young man. And he was the youngest. He wasn't the strongest. He wasn't the oldest. He was just a young man who was tending the sheep, and God chose him to be the next king. Well, he didn't directly become king from there. And he went back and started tending sheep. But one day when the Philistines were attacking, the Israelites were on the other side of the bank, and they're facing each other. And this big man called Goliath stood out from the ranks of the Philistines and challenged the Israelites to put forward their best man. Well, David was there, and he heard the taunts that Goliath was yelling and said, "I will do it." And after a great while to convince his brothers and Saul to let him do it, he did it. And he very famously took 5 smooth stones, and he put one in his sling, and he shot it and killed Goliath. And from there, he entered Saul's service, and he did wonderful things in his service. He routed the Philistines. He did amazing things. And as you read in chapter 18, he becomes great friends with Jonathan. And then and later on in the same book, it says like he did great things, and that he became there was a song named after him that David has killed his thousands, or Saul's killed his thousands, David his tens of thousands. And then the king Saul offers to marry his daughter to David. But the thing that was simmering underneath the surface was that Saul was very jealous of David. David was starting to get all the praise. Saul his thousands, and David killed tens of thousands. So this David is a threat. He's a threat. And so as we kind of go throughout the story, Saul tries to kill David several times. He throws spears at him. And in one specific instance, He is just married Michael, like literally just married Michael. And Michael tells him, "Yeah, run. Saul's going to try to kill you. He's sent out assassins, and he's going to kill you. You need to run." And you can just imagine what kind of situation and what kind of thoughts are running from David's mind. This is not how it's supposed to be. This is unexpected. I was supposed to be king. And then, well, I was a king, but things were going pretty well. I was part of Saul's entourage. I was having great success with the Lord's help. I got to marry the love of his life at the time, Michael, who's the king's daughter. I thought things were going well. This is how it's supposed to be. And I was going to have a long and happy life with you, Michael. But before he could even enjoy it, he has to run. And you think about that conversation they had as they leave. Will Michael, will I ever see you again? I don't know. Will I ever get to come back to my homeland, the place that I love, the place that I call home? I don't know. But you gotta run. You gotta run. You gotta flee from Saul. And that's a very unexpected situation that he was shown. He didn't expect to be in that place. He didn't expect to have to run from his life. And this is just the start. He's going to run for many years. You wouldn't think when God made you king that this would be your lot in life. You think, okay, great, I'm going to be king. I'm going to rule my country. I'm going to do all the things that a king should do. I'm not supposed to run away from this other king that God has rejected. I'm supposed to be the king. But it's a very unexpected situation. And at times when you have those unexpected situations, it's very easy to act in a different way. He was also very alone. He had to be feeling so alone. Because as he ran, he didn't have anything, any way to anyone to go with him. He just had to run. And in chapter 20, he contacts Jonathan and says, "Hey, Saul's going to kill me." And Jonathan's like, "No." And then he discovers, yeah, he is. And so he had to tell Jonathan goodbye, his lifelong friend, his best buddy, the guy that he could count on. So he had to tell his wife goodbye and never known if he'd see her again. Then he had to tell his best bud in the whole world, his best friend, bye. And he didn't know if he would see him again. And he had to go out from his homeland and tried to find a place in which the most powerful person on all that land of Israel was trying to kill him. And he had to hide. Can you imagine his sense of loneliness? How he can't trust the people he comes in contact with because he doesn't know if they'll betray him? How he doesn't have a single ally on his side and he's just running and hiding from his life. He felt alone. And that there's enemies at all sides. We see this in some of his Psalms. And then we see that he is also feeling very scared. He, at one point, is running away and he goes to the high priest and says, and he lies to the priest and says, Saul sent me on a secret mission, which he didn't. Said, "Do you have anything to eat?" And the priest gives him the showbread. And so he's on this supposed mission when he lies. And then when you're also scared, you don't make the brightest decisions. And in chapter 21 is what I'm talking about. He asked for a sword, and the only sword that is found is Goliath's sword, which is very distinct. And then from that place, he goes to the Philistine land, which was not the brightest decision because that distinct sword would have been noticed by the Philistines, who Goliath is from. And he goes there. I want you to focus on this text because it shows what being scared and how that affects you at times. It says, "And David rose and fled that day from Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. And the servants of Achish said to him, 'Is this not David, the king of the land? And they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands and David his tens of thousands.' And David took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish. So he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be insane in their hands and made the marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Then Achish said to his servants, "Behold, you see this man is mad. Why have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" And so we see here that David is so scared that he flees to a foreign land. And then when he's caught, that people recognize him. This is David. This is the one that has killed many of his own people. At one point, he had to kill hundreds of Philistines as a wedding present, as a dowry to Saul to marry Michal. This is someone that the Philistines much feared and probably hated very much. And once he was captured, and he was all alone, he didn't have backup, and they brought him before Achish, the king of the Philistines, the king of Gath. He pretended to be bad. And many people think, well, see, it all worked out. But I think that he did something wrong, just like he did with lying to the priest. He should have lied to the priest, and he shouldn't have tried to be mad. He should have trusted in God, that God would have protected him and saved him, because he had promised him to be king and he wasn't king yet. But he didn't, because he was scared, because he didn't know what was going to happen. He didn't know if he was going to make it. He didn't know if something horrible was going to go wrong. And so he's scared. And so he did things that he probably would have never thought he would do before. And maybe we can learn from this. When we are alone, when we're scared, when something happens that we did not expect, it can mess us up. It can cause us to do things that we never thought we would ever do before, that we would never do, whatever that is. It will change the way we act and the way we think. And we need to be careful in these times, not to be scared, because we have something greater. And we need to be, in these times that we are alone and we don't have a helpmate with us, we need to be very careful. Because even David, a man after God's own heart, a king, someone who faced lions and bears and Goliath, when he was alone and things didn't go to plan and he was scared, he did things he wasn't proud of. And that says a lot about how easy it is and what we need to learn from. So he had an unexpected situation. He felt alone, and he felt scared as well. Well, how did he get through this? How did he get through this situation? How did he be delivered from distress, as our title of the sermon is? How was he delivered from the stress? How did he get through the situation? How did he become the man that we know him to be today? I'll suggest the first thing that he did is he made the best of a bad situation. It was a bad situation. There's no getting around it. And we need to be straight up with our situation and realize that. It's a bad situation. He was running from Saul. It's not what he had planned, but it was what it is. But he made the best of it. And then right after he flees from Achish, we have this verse in chapter 22, verses 1 through 2. It says, David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to him. And everyone who's in great distress, and everyone who's in debt, and everyone who's embittered gathered to him. And he became a commander over them. And they were with him about 400 men. I think he made the best out of a bad situation. I think what he did is he found this new purpose in his life. Yes, I cannot be king right now. That's terrible. I wish I could. I really wish I could be with my family and my wife and my best friend, and we could be sitting around banquet halls in peace. That's what I would like right now. But that's not it. But you know what I can do right now? Is I can help these men that are distressed and embittered and all these things that he talks about. And you know what we learn in Psalms chapter 34, verse 11. In Psalms chapter 43, verse 11, he writes this psalm during this time that he's in this cave in Adullam. And the verse 11, he talks to these men that come to him. And he says, "Come, O children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. What man is there who desires life and loves many days? He may see your good." And he tells them how you live in a way that you can see many days and you can live a good life. It's by fearing the Lord. And he uses this chance of to teach these men a better way of life, and he makes them into honorable men that serve God. He made the best out of a bad situation. And then we look in verse 23, if you keep looking, it says the headline is, he saves the city of Keilah, which is not any different from the things that he's been doing. He's thinking, okay, I'm not king. I don't have the royal armies with me. I can't do all the things that I should, but these are my people. I'm still king. Even though it's not in power, God still made me king, and I still need to protect my people. And then these people are being attacked, and I need to protect them. And so he takes his army, he takes his men, and he goes and protects these different cities. He made the best of a bad situation. And what I think is very cool is that God is working in the background to make the best of the bad situation as well. Because during this time that he's fleeing from Saul, he's all over the place. He's in the Philistines territory. He's all over Israel. He's north, he's south. He's everywhere. He discovers the land, and you got to know he has this knowledge of the land better than anyone else. And when he becomes king in the second Samuel, he fights a lot. He participates in many battles. And one of the things that help you in your battles more than anything is knowing the lay of the land, knowing the locations, knowing the hiding spots, knowing where there's water and where there's not, when there's an advantage. And this is what David does his entire time as king, is he fights many battles and expands the kingdom. And part of the reason he's able to do that is because of his time right now in which he's running from Saul all over the place. And he's learning the land better than he would have otherwise. And so God, in his infinite promise, turned this bad situation into a situation that he would later be grateful for, because it helps him later in life. And I think the same thing applies to us today. Even though this is a bad situation, we need to make the best of it. And I'll talk a little bit more at the very end about that. The second thing that happens that really helps is he's encouraged by a friend. So if you look in chapter 23, and to set up this section is another very low time for David. He saves the city of Keilah, but the city is about to turn against him and tell Saul, "Hey, this David is here. Come and get him." And so even though he just saved their city, he's going to be betrayed by these people. And so he has to run for his life once again. And you've got to know that just wears on him. You never know, when you're going caught. You're responsible for all his men. Your family's not safe, and so you have to hide them in a foreign land. At one point, it says that even David was on one side of the mountain and Saul was on the other side of the mountain, and they just kind of missed each other barely. At times, he's hiding in caves when Saul's men's right outside, knowing that if he's found, Saul would certainly kill him. Never knowing when you go to bed that night if that's going to be the last time you ever sleep. That wears on a man. But look what happens in this section. Verse 15, David saw that Saul had come to seek his life. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horsham. And Jonathan, son Saul, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, "Do not fear, for the hand of Saul, my father, shall not fight you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul, my father, also knows this." And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. And David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. Look what Jonathan did. He knows, Jonathan. This is David's right-hand man. This is best friends. He's been keeping an eye on David and hearing reports and hearing where he is and how he's doing. And he knows that he's been running all his life, or the past several years from Saul. And he knows this is especially low time for David. And so he goes out and goes right to him. He goes right to him and he encourages them. And he just doesn't encourage him and say, good job, you got this. Woo. He encourages them very specifically in the hand of God. He strengthens them in his hand in God. He encourages them in God. And more importantly, and more specifically, he encourages them in God's promise. Because in verse 17, he said to him, do not fear, for the hand of Saul, my father, shall not find you. Why does he know that? Why does he know that Saul, my father, shall not find you? It's because you shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul, my father, also knows this. It's because God has promised that you are going to be king of Israel, and you're not king of Israel yet. So Saul's not going to find you. He's not going to kill you, and we all know this. He strengthens his hand in God's promise, which is something we all need to do. We all need to do that. Again, I'll say a little bit more about that at the end. That's partly why he's able to make it. Get through this situation, keep his spirits up. It's because he's got a friend who encourages him. And then finally, he made a best out of the bad situation. He's encouraged by a friend. And then he also learned to trust God. There's many Psalms that come out of this time in which he is running from Saul. And during this time, he has the ability in which he's learning to trust God. I just picked 2 Psalms out that were written during this time that emphasize this learning of trust. They're too big to put on the screen, so I'm just going to read it to you. The first one is Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is my stronghold of my life. Whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me and eat up my flesh, when my adversaries and foes, it is they who stumble and fall. Though an army encamped against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war arise against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I've asked of the Lord that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, to inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter. In the day of trouble, he will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon the rock. And now my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me. And I will offer in his tent sacrifices that shout with joy. And I will sing and make melody to the Lord. Hear, O Lord, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. You have said, seek my face. My heart says to you, your face, Lord, do I seek. Hide not your face from me. Turn your servant not away in anger. O you have been my help. Cast not off me. Forsake me not. O God of my salvation, for my father and my mother have forsaken me. But Lord will take me in. Teach me your ways, O Lord, and lead me on a path because of my enemies. Give me not up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me. They breathe out violence. I believe I shall look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. As you see in the psalm, he emphasizes how much he trusts in God. The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Whom shall I be afraid? He talks about armies and adversaries coming up against him. He says, why shall I be afraid when I have the Lord on my side? And then also in Psalm 31, he again says, in you, O Lord, do I take refuge. Let me never be put to shame, and your righteousness delivered me. Incline your ear to me, rescue me speedily. Be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. And then later, verse 11, because of my adversaries, I have become a reproach, especially to my neighbors. I'm the object of dread to my acquaintances. Those who see me in the street flee from me. I've been forgotten who is dead. I've become a broken vessel. But he again goes back to the Lord. Blessed be the Lord, for he has wonderfully shown his steadfast love in me. When I was besieged city, I was said in my alarm, I cut off from your sight. But you've heard my voice, my pleas for mercy when I cried for help. Love the Lord, all the saints. The Lord preserves the faithful, but abundantly repays those who act in pride. Be strong and let your heart take courage, all who wait upon the Lord. It is in the times that he was alone and he was scared and that he was going through this bad situation is the time in which his faith and his trust in God grew the most. Because he didn't have himself to rely on. He didn't have a kingdom, an army, or his own power to rely on. He didn't have friends to rely on or families to rely on. He didn't have his knowledge of the future and being in control. He was out of control. He had no resources. The only thing that he could rely on was God. And so his trust and his faith in God grew so much because of that. And we see that in the Psalms. And it was the number one faith-growing part of his life. It's because he went through this hard time in his life. Okay, so that's David. But how can that help us? Well, I have 3 questions, 3 things that I think that we can do in this bad situation in our life that can really help us. 1, how can we make the best out of this bad situation? How can we turn the situation that is not the best, not what we had planned? And maybe you haven't been able to do everything you want, be able to see all the people you want. How can you make this situation for the best? And I would ask you, can you do something to help others in this situation? Can you have do you have a time and a way that you can help others out in some specific way? Maybe this is a chance to show that you love and how much you love and care for your brothers and sisters in Christ. Maybe this time that you can show how much you love and care for your neighbor or your non-Christian friend and show them the love of Christ in their distress and their hard situation. Can you help others? Or perhaps you can grow in your relationship. A lot of us are stuck with people who we live with inside of our house. Maybe that's you have kids in your house. Maybe you have parents inside your house. Maybe you have a spouse in your house. Is this a time that you can grow your relationship? I've heard one lady who was temporarily laid off where she couldn't go to work and they temporarily laid her off. And she was saying that this was not her choice and that she'd rather not do it. But she decided to make the best of it. And through this situation, she's been able to know her kids more. She's been able to know how bright they are and their little quirks and get to know them better and really put a lot into their lives. She's been able to be a better wife to her husband, been able to take care of the house more, to be everything that she always wanted to be, but never had time. Well, a lot of us have a lot of time now. Maybe we can grow in our relationships, show how we really love our husband or wife or siblings or kids, our parents. Maybe this is a time we can really work on our relationship. It may be very difficult at times because we're stuck inside the same house for so long with them. But if we make a conservative effort to try to be the best people that we can be and grow that relationship, we have more time than ever, more quality time than ever to do that. That's a good time for it. And then maybe you can just become a better person yourself. Again, we have more time than we have, at least personally, that I've ever had. I am forced to stay outside. That's taking out a lot of stuff that I typically do. I'm still very busy in some ways, but again, I have a little bit more free time than ever. And so how can we best use that time to make yourself better, to grow yourself? Maybe something that I've personally done is I've started running the last month and a half or so. I've been keeping up with that and trying to become healthier physically because of that. Maybe you can start growing your prayer life or your Bible study life. start growing your relationship with God more. Maybe you can, um, grow some area in your life. Maybe get a routine sleep schedule. Whatever in your area in life you feel like you can grow with, how can you make the best out of a bad situation? How can you grow in that way? How can you mentor someone else? How can you care for someone else? What way can you use this bad situation and use it for the best? And this second question I'm asked, who in your life can you encourage? Who in your life can you help the most? Who can you be a Jonathan to? Who can you be a Jonathan to a David? There are many people probably in our life that are very lonely, who are going through the same kind of things that you're going through. How can you encourage them? Is there someone in your life that you can encourage? Is that by phone call or by letter or dropping a batch of cookies at the door or however that is, or just showing that you're thinking of them or buying them some toilet paper and say, I don't know what that is in your situation. How can you best encourage someone? How can you be the Jonathan in this story, in that section that we're talking about? Go to that David and encourage them. Maybe it's writing Bible scriptures or having a Bible class. Encourage them in God's promises that he'll never forsake you or leave you, that God's in this and he's going to get us through this. How can you be encouragement to someone else? And then finally, how can you grow in your faith in God? It is these times in our life that are hard, that we don't have other people to rely on. It's these times that are difficult to keep going. We struggle with maybe things like depression or laziness or anxiety, these things in life, these scary things in life. These are the times in which our faith and our trust in God can grow the most. But you have to make an effort to do that. When anxiety and scary things come up in your life, your first response will be, I gotta give that to God. I have to pray to God. I have to give that to God. When some opportunity comes up, your first response will be, how can I glorify God in this specific opportunity? And then pray about it. Be how can I grow my relationship with God? How can I get closer to him? And we need to do that, and that needs to be our focus. Because either you're going away from God and you're coming farther and more distance from God, or you're growing closer. And this is the time that we have maybe a little bit more free time than normal. We have time to do that. And maybe we can establish habits now that will carry on past whenever this whole quarantine thing ends. But we need to establish those things as soon as possible. I hope this has been a benefit from you. I feel like David was such an encouraging example to me. How David and people in his life turned such a bad situation, and instead it was a deliverance from distress. It was a bad situation, and they turned it from the best. They encouraged each other, and they trusted in God. And I believe we can get through this distress in the same way. That's how we can be delivered from this distress. Make the best of a bad situation. Encourage people in your life. Have them encourage you. Talk to them on the phone, that kind of stuff. And grow your faith with God. Make your faith strong. And if we do these things, I think we will get through this and become better people on the outside of it. So as you go through it and you look to the end of this whole situation, once we get out of this quarantine, are you going to be a better person? Or are you going to be a worse person? Those are your two options. We're either going up or going down. Which one are you going to be? I believe we can all get through this together and be delivered from this distress. I hope this message was a blessing to you, and let me know if I can help you in any way. God bless you and keep you safe, both physically and spiritually.